You're listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, hosted by Stanfield Gray and John Yarian.
Jack Harvey, you've been EVP of Partnerships at GNIP, EVP of Strategy and Dev at Little, SVP at Gemstar, CEO of Own the Rim. You've worked with a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs. You've sat in that seat yourself. Let's just dive right in. What does it take to be an entrepreneur?
Guts. In a word, it's it's one of my very good friends in Boston. We took a company public, and it takes guts to really make a difference and have that idea and push forward, especially when you're cutting new ground, which typically that's what entrepreneurs do. Whether it's new technology, product, service, it's more than just having that idea. It's that confidence and guts to push forward with it.
Well, let's talk about confidence for a minute. So today you're the CEO of Accelerize, and you help companies grow and scale. Mm-hmm. And we'll dive into that in a minute. But let's circle back to the beginning. So before your first gig, you're coming out of college. What was your confidence level like? Where did you see yourself going? I mean, did you have a plan, or were you just kind of winging it like I was?
I would like to say that there was a plan, and I think there was, just from the standpoint of I wanted to learn as much as I could from a lot of different businesses, a lot of different people. And so the path that I took was, I started off with a very small boutique consulting firm, and that exposed me to a lot of different business owners, different types of businesses, from medical to retail, a number of different areas. And then I switched over to work in an ad agency, which is, as I'm sure you're aware, very deadline centric, but a lot of different brands, a lot of different businesses. In a way, it served as a rapid MBA, where I was working with finance companies, healthcare companies, working with extreme sports companies.
And you're in Boston at this time?
This is in New England. Yeah, so that was actually in Bristol, Providence, Rhode Island, but we had accounts in Boston and all over the country. Probably one of the most important parts of that experience was we had an opportunity to win business with the NHL, and it was a long shot for this agency to get that business, and we had no experience in working in the hockey space. We had been working heavy in finance, but nothing in sports. So I did a deep dive and quickly got smart on the customers that the NHL was trying to reach, and hung out with the Harvard hockey team, the Providence College hockey team, and a bunch of high school hockey teams, and just understood what their lives were about. It was almost like an anthropological study in how they did life and what was important to them, and the grit and the guts that it takes to advance in the world of hockey. And
a lot of dental work too.
A lot of dental work and stitches, right. But long story short, what was really cool is brought all that information back to the creative team. We iterated on film, radio, and different concepts. Came back to the team and said, "Hey, does any of this fit?" And iterated again. By the time it came to pitch, we had a super, super tight presentation of TV, radio, online, outdoor, and we actually didn't pitch it. We played the video of their target market responding to our questions of what's life like, and then we showed, and here's your TV spot, and here's the concept for radio, and here's the concept for outdoor. And there was no disputing, the audience never lies. There's your audience, and we won the business.
So what year was this?
Goodness, that would have been in the late 90s.
So in the late 90s, so take us through, quickly. We're not going to do a linear timeline, but from early 1990s to 2000, your career path and trajectory. What was like the biggest lesson you learned along the way, and what were, let's say, one or two pivotal moments that propelled the ship forward?
So I think certainly that was one, that lesson of really doing your homework and going that extra mile to understand your customer's customer really, really well. And in the case of the NHL, it was hanging out and kind of doing life with the people that they were trying to reach. That also played out within the world of the agency world. Again, we're working with winning business with major pharmaceutical clients and really starting to understand how they operate and how they reach their customers. So that recurring theme of taking the time to really understand your market better than any of your competitors ever will really was a lifelong lesson that I've carried throughout my career.
And your media career transitioned from there to Gemstar? Is that correct? So
actually from there it was to a company called Rocom in Cambridge, which Highland Capital backed. We eventually took it public. And there I put together a pretty significant deal with American Express, working with kind of the top of that organization. And Rocom was essentially a desktop purchasing tool for business periodicals and magazines, kind of like Amazon, but for the enterprise. And that was my switch into kind of the technology sphere. And what influenced that was I just really felt like that is where the market was going. The consumer being able to be a lot more in control of their experience in that world that we now all live in, with kind of everything is on demand through our phones. Luckily, I kind of saw that coming, and so that was the big transition.
Let's talk about that transition. So media is often at the forefront of the evolution of technology, and media companies are early adopters, but obviously there are very painful transitions for traditional media companies, newspapers, television, et cetera, and maybe many of them didn't anticipate certain devices, certain new forms of technology, social media, streaming, of course. In hindsight, what does that seem like to you now? From where we are today, take us through your interaction with advertisers, media companies, the great disruption of that, all the way through to streaming.
So, interestingly enough, within my time at News Corp, and specifically, although I was working for TV Guide's Consumer Electronics Group, the bulk of my time there was really spent working with this cross-functional group that was looking at this shift in the media space. So it was literally the heads of all the major networks, Rupert Murdoch, some pretty interesting people. And what we saw was that film and television is probably about to be Napstered. We're seeing the consumer, this predated smartphone, it predated ubiquity of high-speed data lines going to the home. We saw that was a wave that was coming. And so we said, okay, what are we going to do? Because if the consumer becomes more in control of that experience and we don't get out ahead of it, we kind of don't have a business here. And that's what actually paved the way for the creation of Hulu. So rather than getting scared and panicking and going down the copyright channel, it was, no, let's get ahead of this, embrace the new technology. How do we live in that world? And out of that year-long project came the creation of Hulu, came content being available online, all the major networks offering their content in mobile. And now, as we live in this world where the first screen is no longer the big box in the corner, it's in our hand. So that was a really kind of cool time to be there. Transitioning from that to present day, Actually, it was a conversation I had before coming into your studio today. On demand and access, quick, easy access is increasingly how businesses have to go. Company and a client of ours is in the healthcare space, and they're recognizing how do we provide really good access to healthcare quickly, easily within the enterprise. And so what they're doing is they're making that happen at a much more cost-effective and higher quality area. So what started with media has really almost created a cultural shift and expectation around, hey, what are the core things that I need and how easy is it for me to get there? And the smart entrepreneur is figuring out a way to disrupt that. So, $1 Shave Club, Netflix, Airbnb, Uber, all of those, and we're going to see more and more of those.
So looking back, it's always fun to talk about the one that got away, or the opportunity. And now at this point in your career, if you're advising an entrepreneur, today perhaps it's easier than ever to start a company, but maybe more difficult to scale it or to get traction in the market because there's so much noise around that. Are there any lessons you learn of one that, a moment where you didn't pivot or where you didn't take advantage of something that it's easy to identify that today, but maybe a younger entrepreneur wouldn't have the same awareness perhaps like that you did or you did not have at that time?
Yeah, so there's lots of those. And I think if we're all transparent over our careers, sometimes that visibility becomes more clear the more distance you get from it. I think probably one of the best things that I have learned is, contrary to popular belief, it's not how much money you raise. It's not necessarily the team. Yeah, you hear time and time again, hey, give me a C-level or idea and an A-level team, and you'll have an A-level idea pretty soon. And certainly I subscribe to that. But it's not just the team. It's not just the capital. It's not just the idea. The thing that trumps all of them is timing. If the timing isn't right, you can have all the capital in the world. You can have the best team in the world. You can have a great idea, but if the timing's not right for that idea, it's a big problem. So really being able to measure out, is this the right time? Will the market salute this? Is probably one of the most important things for any entrepreneur team to evaluate. Is our timing right?
It's a great segue to your time at GNIP. So you were EVP of partnerships there, launched out of Techstars Boulder.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the timing of that. Twitter was on fire, adoption rates were incredible, launched about 10 years ago. And tell us how GNIP was able to tap into that, become a viable acquisition partner, and a little bit about your experience there.
Sure. So the GNIP experience really is emblematic, and really they're really kind of the poster child of the Techstars methodology and what Brad Feld and all those guys created a number of years ago in Boulder, which was to be very entrepreneur-centric, to have a full stack of really kind of leaned-in mentors that can carry the entrepreneur and the team through kind of full life cycle. And the way that GNIP hit my radar was through Chris Moody. And Chris and I worked together for the same billionaire in Boston for a number of years, doing some pretty interesting technology development in the WebOS space, and created our own WebOS. It's a whole other line. But he came in to become COO and eventually CEO. And what the magic of GNIP, there should be an HBR case study on GNIP. It's incredibly powerful. But it was recognizing the value in data and recognizing that, okay, there's all this torrent of activity and engagement happening on Twitter and on these other social media platforms, and creating this ocean of data. How do we extract meaning from it? And it was, Judd Valesky and those guys really saying, we believe that there's something here. We believe that there's something here that can help inform better decisions among the Fortune 500. And so they created this platform that, as you know, aggregated the data from Twitter and Foursquare and Tumblr and a number of others, and started to create this composite view of what was going on in the marketplace, and empowering not just the marketing arms of these companies and PR sides of these companies with, hey, here's what's happening with customer sentiment, but really equipping them with data and insights that help inform product releases and product development and innovation and all sorts of really, really kind of groundbreaking things that before that was available and aggregated just weren't possible. So it was catching that at a time when nobody else did. There was another company, DataSift, that started in almost the same time that we did, doing kind of the same thing. We took the approach of raising a very, by comparison, small amount of capital, and really focused on delivering exceptional service to our partners like Twitter and the customers that we were serving. And we just really held true to that we felt like the model we had was really, really strong. And it was a really interesting comparison because they ended up raising something upwards of, I think, $70 million over that same time period. And obviously that's a way you can do it. We just chose not to. And after 5 years of operation, as you know, in April of 2014, we had a 9-figure exit to Twitter.
Well, let's take a mental jet here from Boulder down to Charleston, South Carolina, where you live today. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about for a minute the kind of startup ecosystem you see here and the community that's kind of emerging in Charleston, and compare that a little to the one that Techstars built in Boulder. What are some of the assets they have that we don't have? What are some things unique to Charleston? What can we build on?
So it's a fascinating time where I was essentially spending my weekdays in Boulder and weekends here in Charleston. And it was quietly, I thought it was like, I have one of the best gigs in the world. I am hanging out in Boulder, working with some of the most amazing people I've ever worked with in my life, and Techstars and Foundry Group and just that whole vibe in Boulder. Really, really exciting space. And at GNIP, who was just on this incredible trajectory. And then coming back to Charleston, it was just this incredible, small southern city, but growing in rich and meaningful ways, and rich in culture. And although it's deep south, has all these really cool things happening with arts and culture, and interesting companies starting to grow here, and big companies starting to move here. And so it was difficult not to draw the comparisons. And so I pressed really hard into what made Boulder Boulder, what happened. And because the comparisons were really, really strong. Here you have Boulder, this town that, and I've gone to Boulder for, goodness, probably 20, 25 years of my life. We have family there. But just turned into this juggernaut that people from New York and San Francisco and other parts of the world have moved to become a part of this thing that's happening there. Very similar to what's happening here in Charleston, where you have people from New York and Boston and other parts of the country just pouring in here at 40 people a day. And then Boeing and Bosch and Mercedes and Volvo and Michelin, and the list continues to grow. Boulder there was a major government account that moved to Boulder in, I think, the 60s, and then IBM, so one company, put a big team out there, largely PhDs, to go service that government agency. And as that grew, people kind of matriculated out, and they started to start their own companies. And venture, and Brad Feld moves there, starts Foundry Group and Techstars, and kind of the rest is history. The big thing is that Feld recognized that it takes a real community fully involved, and this give first mentality. No fiefdoms. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this in a way that is give first, give back. And Charleston has had, I think, a lot of really strong attempts at doing that at the growth stage. And I think there's been some exciting things that have happened. What's good is I'm now starting to see that there's full recognition that a Techstars model is really what is kind of like that last missing link. But the comparisons, and I think the magic of Techstars and what happened in Boulder, and what I believe can happen here in Charleston, is getting all those people from large corporations, academia, the venture community, entrepreneurs, all on the same page that if we're going to do this, we're going to do this together. We're not going to have fiefdoms. It's fine to compete over people and deals and things of that sort. That's natural. It's good, but we're all aligned on growing this community and growing the culture of give first and give back. Probably the best example of that in Boulder that I experienced was at GNIP. And when GNIP did have a significant exit, we sold to Twitter. A lot of times when a big company has a big exit like that, the board and the management team, maybe certainly the senior management, some of the investors all get together for an expensive dinner and have great wine and give each other high fives. We're all made some great money. GNIP chose not to do that. What GNIP chose to do is we held a party at the Boulder Theater called #BoulderWins, because this was a win for Boulder. And literally everybody was invited. Anybody, kids, whomever. And you did have to pay to get in. I think it was like $20. All that money went directly to an entrepreneur fund, and that night a check was given to that fund. And that's probably one of the best and most powerful examples of what it means to give back, to be thinking about what does that other person need? How do I help advance the community? And so that's the heart that I certainly come into this community with, and I hope becomes contagious here.
My co-host John Yarian and I were having this conversation earlier about is there something unique about the South and this essence of hospitality and the way people view community? And I have to point out that Brad Feld grew up in Dallas. Mm-hmm. So he's from the South, and I'm sure he experienced some of that growing up and that type of community, and perhaps exported some of that to Boulder. Putting on your kind of philosophical cap for a minute, do you think there are some ingredients here that already lay the groundwork for this type of sharing community and a Charleston wins mentality?
I do, and there's so much that the history here is both dark and inspiring. And I think that the people that have been here, certainly much longer than I have, we moved here from Boston 11 years ago, understand that far better than I probably ever will. But something that happened here, probably, certainly one of the biggest tragedies that I've ever seen in my life was the Emanuel 9. And how this community responded to that still gives me chills. And when the mayor called for a meeting of unity and peace on the bridge a couple miles over there, the Cooper River Bridge, And the expectation was that there was maybe about a few thousand would show up. And close to 30,000 showed up, which, by the way, the full occupancy of Fenway Park is 39,000, I believe. And complete strangers were hugging, were sharing tears. And there were people from all over the United States. We met this African-American man in his 80s who had hitchhiked down from Harlem to become a part of this because he saw what was happening. And out of that tragedy, what Charleston is about was really catalyzed. And I'm not the only one who carries that story, obviously, but that's really powerful, especially amidst the backdrop of what is going on in our country and had gone on in our country and the divisiveness. And so that's why I feel so optimistic about what can happen here, what is happening here. It's at a very, very deep level. So if it can happen after something like that, I think I'm really excited about what can happen at Growth Stage and bringing these other companies here. And whenever we bring guests in, whether they're friends or business people, that's what you hear is, I can't believe how nice everybody is and how cooperative they are.
Right. So if we could build some kind of framework around those emotions and that expression of unity, and provide opportunities to people that of other ethnicities, religions, backgrounds, how would that translate into business? What are some ideas of what that might look like? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, and I know that's not a simple answer, but I thought maybe you have a thought on that.
Yeah, actually, and this is what Accelerize is all about. And
this Accelerize is a company you recently launched.
Yeah, so Accelerize is in short a company that focuses on working with growth stage companies that are focused on going from point A to point B with some expediency and urgency, but doing it the right way. And we put together the teams, the people, and align them many times with capital to achieve those outcomes. But we also have, so I talked about consulting, the capital side, and there's a council of smart people and subject matter experts. But the fourth spoke to that is community. And so working with not-for-profits and social entrepreneurs and just people or even groups in the community that are doing important things to do what we can to help them out. Dig South is a great example of this. As soon as I learned what Dig South was doing, I figured out a way how to meet you and how to help. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we've had a little bit of impact on that. There's other groups that are doing some interesting things as well to help bring more big companies here. So I think the whole notion of how we set the stage for that growth and that community is by leading through example and gifting hours, gifting time, gifting relationships, gifting influence to the things that really do matter. And so that is, we are a for-profit organization, but getting behind people and groups and organizations that we feel like are really doing important things in the market, finding ways to get them on our calendar and make time for them.
John and I also decided today that we were launching the Institute of Southern Futurism.
Because they have special hats for that?
Right, because you sell us. I can't recall meeting anyone who identified themselves as a Southern futurist, other than myself this morning, with a new hat. So putting on your Southern futurist hat, could you give us, let's say, 3 predictions 5 years from now, what you see happening here in Charleston?
A lot more traffic.
Right, we can all agree on that.
The need for public transportation.
Okay, that's kind of the same as number 1.
Yeah, to address that. I think 5 years out, we're going to see a major company lay claim to headquarters here. Whether that's a company overseas that says, you know what, we're going to throw U.S. headquarters here.
Any thoughts on a likely candidate, a type of industry?
Don't want to. No, I don't want to.
Okay,
but given who's here, and clearly manufacturers seem to be gravitating, so perhaps there's somebody in that category.
I like it. So number one is we'll address the transportation infrastructure. Number two, a major company headquartered here. And for the grand finale, number three?
Number three, I think we're going to see Dig South rise up and become a major influence, not just in Charleston, but the Southeast.
Thank you. I love the sound of that, of course. But Jack, it's been a pleasure having you here today. Thank you for joining the show. Any last words from my silent co-host here?
None whatsoever. Great job, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, where innovators dish on success, failure, and a rapidly evolving South.